Hello, greetings, my fellow YouTubers and Facebook friends. But this your girl Tiffany here live in effect. So today I'm going to be dealing with the topic about Anna Judge. Anna Judge was a runaway slave around the 17th century. All right, so what makes it very interesting about her story is the fact that she was under the ownership of Martha Washington. Martha Washington was the wife of George Washington, the president. Now, she was under her ownership before Martha was married to George Washington. And as a matter of fact, it was an inheritance because her husband had passed away, so she was a widow. So while she was a widow, she not only had Ona, but also she had her mother as well. Okay. However, when Ona was sent to Philadelphia, she eventually got away. So ever since she got away, they never captured her. So they was, putting out putting out flyers, papers, and whatever, trying to find where this woman was at, but they could never find her. So she was hidden underground for a long period of time until her death in 1845. Or 1849. We're going to get into all that. But anyways, I wanted to share that information. Somebody brought it to me on one of my Facebook group, and I never heard this woman before until like recently. And so somebody just brought some information and told me something about her. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do a video about this lady because it seems to be very interesting. So, it's just interesting the fact that she was a runaway and she was never captured. So I said, well, you know what? I'm going to make it my business to go ahead and look up more and do some research on her and present the source and whatnot. And so that's what I did. All right, so now I don't have a picture of her as far as what she looked like, but I do have the available sources that I could find. And I have a book also. So you guys go ahead and check it out. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share this channel, and all that great stuff. All right, so right here, I'm on the website of encyclopediavirginia.org. And on this website, according to the information, as you can see, she went by the name Onye, but her real name was Anna. All right, so this was the advertisement for a runaway slave right here to my right. Okay, that was the advertisement. So it says here, Anna was the enslaved personal attendant of Martha Curtis Washington when she ran away from the president's house in Philadelphia in 1796. And it said that she was born about 1773 at Mount Vernon. Judge began laboring in the mansion when she was 10 years old. After George Washington was elected president in 1789, she accompanied the family to New York, and then when the federal capital moved to Philadelphia on May 21st, 1796, she escaped from the president's mansions while the family ate dinner and boarded a ship for Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Washington's agents tracked her there twice, speaking with her in 1796 and 1799, but failing to apprehend her. Judge married the free black sailor John Stynes in 1797, and the couple had 3 children before his death in 1803. Annie Judge Stynes lived the rest of her life in poverty. In 1845 and 1847, she gave interviews to abolitionist newspapers recounting the story of her life with the Washington family and her escape from slavery. And so it says she died in Greenland, New Hampshire in 1848. Now, right down here, it goes further into details. All right. So it says a newspaper reported from 1845 noted that her name at the time of her escape had been Anna Maria Judge. Annie is a nickname that appears in Washington's paper and in advertisement for her return. So it says in a 1796 letter, Washington referred to Annie Judge as she called herself while with us. Judge was the daughter of Betty, an enslaved seamstress, and probably the English tailor Andrew Judge, an indentured servant who labored at Mount Vernon from 1772 until about 1780. Though her mother Judge had four half siblings, Austin, whose father is unknown, Tom Davis, and Betty Davis, the children of an indentured weaver named Thomas Davis, and Philadelphia, later Philadelphia Costin. All right, and then goes on to say right down here, it says that Judge recalled receiving no education or religious instruction as a child. At the age of 10, she became the body servant of Martha Washington. On February 4th, 1789, George Washington was elected president. And in April, he left for New York, the federal capital. On May 16, Martha Washington and her household, included Judge Austin and 5 other slaves, left Mount Vernon to join him. They lived in New York for just more than a year, returned to Mount Vernon for an extended visit on August 30th, 1790. In the meanwhile, the capital had moved to Philadelphia, where the Washingtons traveled in November again with Judge and her half-brother. All right. So right here it says in the spring of 1791, George Washington learned that Pennsylvania law complicated his ability to hold slaves in the state. Passed in 1780, an act for gradual abolition of slavery required that any slaves living in Pennsylvania for 6 uninterrupted months be freed. In a letter to his personal secretary dated in April the 12th of 1791, Washington ordered that his slaves be sent back to Virginia before their 6 months expired in May, and then returned to Philadelphia. It is unclear whether he was unaware of a 1788 amendment to the Pennsylvania Act that prohibited exactly this means of subverting the law. There also was some confusion at the time over whether federal officials were exempt from the law's requirement, and if they were not, whether Pennsylvania would enforce them in such a politically sensitive situation. All right. Now, then it goes on down here. It says, whatever the case, Washington took no chances explaining his secretary that the movement of his slaves ought to be accomplished under pretext that may deceive both them and the public. Washington worried that should his slaves learn of the law, they might be tempted by freedom. He also noted that all but 2 of his slaves in Philadelphia, including Judge and Austin, were dower slaves, meaning that they had come to the marriage with his wife and were technically owned by the estate of her first husband, Daniel Park Custis. Should he lose them, Washington wrote, he would be forced to reimburse the Custis estate. It says, for the next 5 years, Judge remained in Philadelphia with discreet trips out of state occurring every 6 months. On March the 21st, 1796, Martha Washington's granddaughter, Elizabeth Park Custis, married Thomas Law, an Englishman 20 years her senior. Judge learned that she was to be given to the couple as a gift, perhaps after Washington's death. She later told a reporter that she was determined never to be the slave of Elizabeth Custis Law. Now, many people are surprised. Now, see, at one point in time, there was talk about George Washington, whether he owned slaves or not. Well, according to this account, he did. He had slaves, okay? However, only Judge was not one of his slaves. As a matter of fact, she was the slave of his wife. His wife was the one that owned her and her brother. So it was through marriage that she became a part of the family or the ownership. Other than that, he didn't have any ownership technically over her. It was his wife, deceased husband, that was in control of them. So to answer the question that did George Washington have slaves? Yes, he had slaves of his own. He did, and also his wife had slaves of her own when they got into marriage. And as you can see, George Washington, he wanted to have slaves in Philadelphia, but the law in Pennsylvania said that the slaves that was around only for a few months or prior to 6 months, they had to be let go. They had to be free. And he didn't like that. He wasn't approving of that at all. He was like, wait a minute, what you mean they gotta be let free? So it was hard for him to own slaves, because that's when the abolitionist movement was really on the rise, and they was really taking over. They was like, look, we're gonna do whatever we can to abolish slavery. So in the North, slavery was abolished. You know what I'm saying? They had the movement going on. But in the South, it was a whole other ball game in the South. You know what I'm saying? Even after the abolitionist movement, the Southern states still kept slaves coming. They still owned slaves. They weren't studying that abolitionist stuff. So it wasn't very prominent in the South, but it was very prominent up north and in the East Coast area. And we talking about the abolitionist movement and abolishing slave laws. It was very prominent up there. All right. And now this is before the United States. See, that's a whole nother topic. What people don't know, that the northern part of the United States was considered as United States, and the southern part of the United States was considered as the Confederate States of America. Get it? The southern part of the United States was considered as the Confederate States of America, and the northern part of the United States was considered as the United States of America. So this is before the Civil War. All right. This is before the Civil War. And after the Civil War took place and after the Reconstruction era, then that's when they decided that finally we're going to have a United States as a whole. But prior to that, it was two separate America. It was two separate America in North America. So United States being the North and the Confederate States of America being the South. All right. But that's another topic though. Just wanted to throw that back out there. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. So let's look at the escape. How did she escape? And how did she become so clever with it? Well, Judge fled the president's house in Philadelphia on May 21st of 1796 while the family ate dinner. Soon after, she boarded the Nancy, which is a ship, a sloop captained by John Bowles and bound for Portsmouth, New Hampshire. There she likely found aid with the city's free black population. Notice offering a $10 reward for her return appeared on May the 24th in Philadelphia Gazette and Universal Daily Advertiser, and a day later in Claypool's American Daily Advertiser. Washington alerted various friends and associates to Judge escape on June 28th. Thomas Lee, the son of Richard Henry Lee, wrote to inform the president that his slave had been sighted in New York. Later in the summer, another reported placed her in Portsmouth. Elizabeth Landon, the daughter of U.S. Senator John Landon, and a past visitor to Mount Vernon, recognized Judge on the streets. Okay. So this was the house over here to my right, if you see the image, where George Washington was staying, him and his family, right here. All right, so it says September the 1st of 1796. Washington wrote to his Secretary of the Treasury, Oliver Wolcott Jr., demanding that he engage the customs collector at Portsmouth to apprehend the missing slave. Now, this is the picture of the gentleman right here. That was his secretary. Judge, he wrote, should be seized and in apparent violation of the Fugitive Slave Act, which required that fugitive slaves appear before a local magistrate, be immediately sent to Alexandria. Washington apologized to Wolcott for the request, but the ingratitude of the girl, he wrote, who was brought up and treated more like a child than a servant, and Mrs. Washington's desire to recover her ought not to escape with impunity if it can be avoided. So, in other words, what he was saying is basically Onye should be punished because she escaped from a family that treated her like she was one of their own versus being a slave. They felt like, okay, when she get back, once you capture this woman, she is going to be punished. And that's what it was. If you was a fugitive slave and you ran away from the plantation and you was captured, they were going to punish you. And you was going to get the punishment of being beaten in front of everybody with whips, or you were going to be killed, execution. So that was two punishments. Either you was going to be beaten or you're going to be killed. And that was the reason why Onye said, I'm not going back. I'm not going to let them find me because they're going to end up beating the crap out of me or they're going to kill me. And I refuse for that to even happen. So I'm just going to lay low. That was her attitude. And she laid low. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. So it says, Joseph Whipple, the customs collector, succeeded in interviewing Judge on the ruse that he was interested in hiring her as a maid. He even arranged for her to travel to Virginia, but she failed to appear at the designated time. In a letter to the Wolcott dated October the 4th, 1796, Whipple wrote that Judge was willing to return only if she were promised her freedom upon the Washington's death. Otherwise, she possessed a thirst for complete freedom and should rather suffer death than return to slavery. Washington wrote directly to Whipple on this November 28th that if Judge returned voluntarily with no promise of freedom, her late conduct would be forgiven by her mistress. If not, then she should be removed forcibly. In a reply dated December 27th, Whipple apologized for his failure to apprehend Judge, promised to do his best, and remarkably advocated for the gradual abolition of slavery. All right. So this is the house of Governor John Landon. That's a beautiful home, by the way, but that was the house that the governor stayed in. All right, so Washington made one final attempt to capture his slave before his death in December of 1799. On August 11th of that year, he wrote his wife's nephew, Burwell Bassett Jr., who was then serving in the Senate of Virginia, requesting that he travel to New Hampshire. While taking care to avoid anything unpleasant or troublesome, Washington wrote he should find Judge and bring her back to Virginia. In Portsmouth, Bassett stayed with Senator Landon, who told him where Judge lived, like Joseph Whipple before him. Bassett was unable to convince her to leave. Also, like Whipple, he did not immediately take her into custody, and when at some unknown time he returned to her home, she was gone. She got the hell away. All right, and so then it goes on later in the years. On January 8th, 1797, Judge and the free black sailor John Steins, known as Jack, received a certificate of marriage in Greenland, New Hampshire. The ceremony was performed by Samuel Haven, minister of the South Church Congregational Church of Portsmouth. The couple had 2 daughters and a son. After Jack Stein's death in 1803, the family became impoverished, moving in with the Jacks, a free black family in Greenland. In August of 1816, Annie Stein sent her daughters to labor as indentured servants with a neighbor. Her son became a sailor. All three were dead by 1845. Wow, that's tragic. When Thomas H. Archibald, a Baptist minister, visits Steins, in his interview, which appeared on May 22nd in the Granite Freeman, an abolitionist newspaper published in Concord, New Hampshire, Steins described her life with the Washingtons and her escape from Philadelphia. When asked if she was not sorry she left Washington as she had labored so much harder since then before, her reply is no, I am free and have, I trust, been made a child of God by the means. A second interview conducted by Benjamin Chase appeared in the abolitionist paper, The Liberator, on January the 1st of 1847. So, of course, she died in Greenland on February the 25th, 1848. All right. So that's her story. You can find this information on encyclopediavirginia.org. You know, it's funny. In school, we was taught by George Washington and many of the presidents, but we were never taught that this man was a slave owner at one point in time, and that his wife was a slave owner. We were never taught that in elementary school, middle school, not even high school. Maybe in college, for those of us, depends on what the subject or what the field of study was, but for the most part, not in secondary school, we weren't taught this type of information. See, this is something that was kept a secret for a reason. But now that you know, you can go and look it up for yourself. For those of you that had questions or that was wondering, yes, George Washington owned slaves, okay? And his wife had slaves of her own too. All right, so you guys can go find that out for yourselves. And also, I have another source of information with two more articles. This one comes from the United States National Park Service. All right, as you can see, this was I guess this is Philadelphia, and this is one of the houses that George Washington was staying in, okay? But it was torn down. Now it's like a museum or it's like an exhibit. But this is where she was staying at with George Washington, right here in Philadelphia. This place, this building right here, which was a house at one point in time. It says, for I knew that if I went back to Virginia, I would never get my liberty. All right, so it's pretty much the same information that I read before, but again, you can find it here on the nationalparkservice.org. Oops. Yeah, so you can find it here. And this is the museum right in Philadelphia, right in the area. And got the name Austin, Paris, Hercules, Christopher Shields, Richmond Giles, Ani Judge, and Maul Joe. So these are the list of people who was the slaves or who was under the ownership of the Washington family. So stayed with the Washington families. All right. So here it is. You guys can go ahead and do that research for yourself. Look it up if you need to, if it's necessary. All right. All right. So And here's another one. All right, so right here it says mountvernon.org. And if you guys don't know where Mount Vernon is at, that's in New York. Okay. Mount Vernon is in New York. All right, so now right here, what interesting about this website, and this is the one that was sent to me. Right here, now it gives a more description of what she looked like. So it says, Honor Judge, often referenced by the Washingtons, Onye, was born at Mount Vernon around 1774. She was the daughter of Betty, an enslaved seamstress living on a mansion house farm, and Andrew Judge, a white English tailor whom Washington hired from 1772 to 1784. Anna was later described as a light mulatto girl, much freckles and almost white. So that means she was a very light-skinned woman with freckles on her face. So she had a lot of freckles and she was light-skinned. All right. So, and it says, like many other slaves of mixed race descent, she received a post in the household at age 10. She became Martha Washington's personal maid. Like her mother, Anna was skilled at sewing, the perfect mistress of her needle. Also, like her mother, Anna and her younger sister, Daphne or Delphi, belonged to the Cuttis estate and so would pass to Martha Washington's heirs upon the latter death. So, as you guys can see right here, this is her description. I'm just gonna hold it up. That's the description of what she looked like: a light skin or a light mulatto girl, much freckle and almost white. That was her description. All right. And I'm quite sure her parents did not have relationships with each other. All right. By her mother being an enslaved woman, more than likely her daddy was probably raping her mama. And that's how she got into a picture. So yeah, them white men at that time, they didn't care about having no relationship with a woman that was enslaved. They didn't even look at the value of a black woman, African descendant woman. They didn't look at that value. They like, okay, she a slave, fuck it. So that's where the concept of the paramour rights came in. The paramour rights mean that the slave masters can have sex with the African women, the African slave women. So whenever they felt like it. So as far as they concerned, those African slave women were nothing more than a breeding farm. They were a breeding farm. They breed children. That's the only thing they was good for in their eyes. They didn't see no values in them. Just breed children, and that's it. So that was the case. So her daddy didn't stick around long enough with her mama. Her dad wasn't trying to free her mama. Her daddy was an Englishman. He was an Englishman and a tailor that was working for George Washington. Do you think he was trying to free her damn mama? No, he wasn't giving a damn. He didn't. He got what he wanted and he kept it moving. Yeah. So, anyways, so yeah, that's her story. Of course, that's the description of her. If you guys want to check out more information about that, this article also goes into her biography, and it can be found at mountvernon.org. Mountvernon.org. All right. And it's called George Washington Mount Vernon. Okay. So you can find all the information you wanted. All right, give me So also, I want to show you guys a book that's pertaining to her life too. Now, this book right here is called Never Caught: The Washington's Relentless Pursuit of Their Runaway Slave, Honor Judge Erica Armstrong Dunbar. All right. So this book gives in a more detailed account about her life, her legacy, and her family background. So as a matter of fact, let me show you guys something real quick that's very interesting. All right, so let's see. It doesn't show what year this book was written. I'm not sure what year that this book was written, but it probably came out just recently. So, all right, so this is Anna's family tree. All right, this is her mama Betty, and her daddy name is Andrew Judge. Okay. And so as you can see, the way the family tree is broken down is different. So it shows her maternal lineage. All right, and her maternal lineage descendant. Okay. So it says this family tree shows the relationships as far as they are known between Anna Judge's mother, Betty, and her children and their descendants. All right. So check this out. So these are the accounts of the fact that she had children with different men, obviously. So right over here, this is Anna Judge's father, Andrew Judge. All right, Anna Judge Stein and Jack Stein. They were a couple. Okay. So Andrew Judge and Betty had Anna Judge, and Anna Judge was married to Jack Stein, and they both had 3 children. Okay. And so down here, it was unknown who Betty had a relationship with, but she ended up having 2 kids with the unknown individual. Well, no, she had one child with the unknown individual, and her child was married to somebody named William Costin, and this is their descendants. Okay. And right here, Thomas Davis. All right, and this is the kids that she had with Thomas, Tom Davis and Betty Davis. And Betty Davis got into a relationship with the person who is unknown, and this is her descendants. Okay, Annie Fortune, Lucinda, and Nancy. Okay. Then the unknown relationship that Betty had with an individual, she had a son named Austin. All right. And then Austin was married to somebody named Charlotte. And these are their children at the very bottom. So I know it's a little confusing to read it, but that's like the pedigree. So that's the pedigree of the family history and their descendancy. So yeah, that's her family tree right there. All right. Okay, you see chapter 1, Betty's daughter. So right here it says list of slaves at Mount Vernon, 1799. In June of 1773, the unimaginable happened. It showed in Virginia. So these are the records. It says Negroes belongs to George Washington. And this, I can't read this. It's kind of scribbled right here. And by marriage. It says, so I guess, okay, it says George Washington belonged to his own and by marriage. Okay. So these are the accounts of George Washington's slaves. All right, these are the count of George Washington slaves right here. It's kind of hard to read the names because it's kind of like scribbled. All right, and then it's another count of, I don't know what that person's name is, donor. I can't really read that person's name right here. So, but the names of the individuals, their ages and whatnot. So again, of course, it's kind of hard to read. Yeah. Let me see if her mother's name on here. I believe her mom's name is on here. Let me see something. Okay, her mom's name on here somewhere. Annie's mother. It's somewhere on here, but I can't really see. Can't really read the scribble like that. All right. But, okay. All right, well, I guess her name is down here at the bottom. Yep. All right, so yeah, that's the information I just want to show you guys. Like I said, you guys can check out this book yourself. It's called Never Caught: The Washington Relentless Pursuit of Their Runaway Slave, on a Judge Erica Armstrong Dunbar. So there you go. All right. Also, I want to show you guys this book. This book is called They Were Her Property. Now, I didn't want to believe that there were women. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't know that there were white women who owned slaves until I found out about Onye Judge. I didn't even know that. And until I purchased this book right here. Because I thought that the main people that was owning slave was white men. And they were the only ones that had rights. And the wives, they didn't really have any say so. But it is true that there are white women that had slaves themselves. And it wasn't only through marriage. Okay. So you had some women out there that was able to purchase slaves, but it's not as much information going around about them as it is about the white males who were the slave masters, whatnot. So, and of course, you gotta remember that at that time period, it was very patriarchal. So the white men felt like they were more dominant anyways. So, yeah. But you guys make sure you check this book out. It's called They Were Her Property. White Women as Slave Owners in the American South. So later on, I may do a video about this book. Okay. If not later, maybe tomorrow. It depends. So I will just keep you guys posted. But eventually I want to talk about this book. So I'm going to give myself some time to read more into it. And then, take some notes or whatnot. But if you guys don't read this book, please do so. And it was written by a sister. Her name is Stephanie E. Jones Roger. That's her name, Stephanie E. Jones Roger, if y'all can see it. They Were Her Property. Stephanie E. Jones Roger. White Women as Slave Owners in the American South. Okay. All right, there you go. All right, then, ladies and gentlemen. So that's all for today. Thank you for those of you that was tuning in watching. And I appreciate the support as usual. So please make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell and share the content. And I will keep you guys posted on what's going on. So until then, peace and power, elevation be to all of you. This your girl, Tiffany, and I'll catch you guys later. All right.